so I was actually gonna go over some concepts and see how this works out. A lot of times, especially when I do privates, I get a lot of questions about like conceptual things, especially for beginners. Like, you know, one concept would be like, you know, staying T-Rexed, staying real tight. But I've seen, like, you know, after about 6 months, a white belt is still doing this and he's not moving around. You know, that's not good. You have to learn. It's all about timing and understanding when and when not to use that. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. You should use it. But that to me is like a concept. Like in general, we want to stay tight. I get asked those questions a lot. For me, I break things down. I like to break things down in concepts that work kind of universally, because I think you can know X amount of moves, but if you kind of understand how you need to create space or how you need to reduce space, if you understand that, you can have a limited amount of you know, moves in your repertoire, but you can actually still control a position and still pull off the 2 or 3 moves you actually know, just by understanding conceptually how to do things. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is like somebody standing. Okay, so somebody standing, and I'm in my guard. So the first thing I always teach is like the concept of kind of, and this is really universal, staying on the inside. And that means with everything. So I mean, my hands always stay on the inside, and I'm always trying to stay on the inside between his legs. This is very, this is a good concept even when just working with legs, right? We're always trying to pummel in and get on the inside of the position. Even if Ivan passes, right? I'm always trying to look, see how my hands are staying on the inside, right? I have a leg on the inside, my hands are on the inside. As soon as I'm starting to open up like this, and he gets on the inside, now we're in trouble, okay? So that is a very simple concept, is that no matter what's happening, I'm always trying to stay between the leg, keep at least 1 foot between his legs and keeping my hands on the inside as if we were standing and pummeling, right? It's the same kind of concept, because whatever happens, even if he gets the full side control and I have the inside position, I still have all this space to work with, right? I can shrimp and then maybe start working a guard or whatever I want to do, or working some attacks. So that's the first concept. No matter where you're at and what you're doing, always look at, even if you don't know what's happening, always look to kind of stay to the inside of the position. As soon as you find yourself grabbing over top and doing this, unless you have a plan, doesn't mean it's not wrong, it doesn't mean it's wrong, but unless you have like a cool plan from there, then, you know, then try to focus on staying on the inside. That's what I do, especially for like guard retention, which we may get into for that. So that would be the first concept. The second one is connection. So again, Ivan stands, let's say. Whenever somebody stands, I'll hand fight a little bit here, but really what I'm looking for is to make sure that I have as many parts of my body contact with him. One of the biggest mistakes I see people do, when they first, especially when they first start jiu-jitsu, is they do this. They post their hands back here and they're like doing this stuff, and I was passing my guard and I'm just like trying to run away and do this. What am I doing? So the idea, I think, what the person's what's going through the person's mind is like they're trying to keep upright, right, and try to fight with their feet. But this idea is really inferior to actually me making contact with him, okay? Because once I make 4 points of contact, I can start following him and having a little bit of a control, and I can start working my game. So that's another concept, is how I make contact. Even when he's down on his knees and we start in this position, I'm making contact. Hook, neck, hands. I'm constantly hand fighting, okay? So I don't just kind of like sit out here and just do this stuff, right? Okay, so I'm immediately engaging. Whatever game I'm playing, doesn't matter. There's a million things you can do from here. But that's the concept, is connection, okay? I have to make contact with him, right? With everything. And if you notice what I did with my feet, right? I always talk about here, if he's standing, just so you can see. Whenever with my feet, I always tell everybody here that we should be using our feet as hands, right? Like I'm grabbing and pulling. So if you can get really efficient with your feet, that's gonna take your game up a notch, okay? As soon as you start to learn how to use your feet, I think Donner has a famous saying about that. You know, the person who learns how to use their legs and their feet quicker, their game's gonna, go up. So that's actually very true. And the way you do that is you look at points of contact. Any kind of bend in the body or anything here, I can actually flex and control, right? So in other words, if I have a hook here and a hook here and I'm here, I can actually push Ivan and I can pull Ivan, okay? So that's the idea here, is that I'm not just putting my foot like here and like just doing this and laying my feet down or just making a connection. I'm actually hooking and grabbing, right? This is gonna help a lot on top of with the connection of understanding how to actually engage and have, you know, a better shot when rolling with somebody, and how to be most efficient, basically. Let's see, 3, I would say, is alignment, right? A very common thing with alignment, I do when I'm rolling, is I look at if I'm in alignment with Ivan. If I'm in alignment with Ivan, it's almost like a muscle thing. I have a saying too, like I always say that I always assume the person is stronger than me, right? So I never want to really like kind of muscle somebody over. Even if I'm stronger than the person, I generally won't. I'll try to like match them technique for technique, and I think that's for me personally how I feel like I can get better, right? Because I don't think strength really helps in a lot of roles. So because you're always going to find somebody stronger. So, but the idea here is to take off of alignment. Now this is universal. Whether I'm attacking Ivan, I'll give 2 demonstrations. But one is, if let's say I get Ivan in side control. If I'm on top, right? If I always show this. If I get on top here and I get side control and I'm just like, let's just say I'm holding and I'm squeezing him or whatever type of side control I'm doing. If Ivan is in alignment, imagine Ivan is like bench pressing, right? If Ivan does a bench press and his spine is in complete alignment, that means he can probably lift a substantial amount of weight. However, as soon as I take Ivan off of any kind of alignment, usually with his neck, I'll pull it to the side. Imagine bench pressing with your neck to your ear, right? You're gonna be able to lift substantially less weight, okay? The same with the hips, right? If I start controlling the hips, I'm twisting and I'm making it much more difficult and reducing his pushing or pulling power, okay? So, and it makes it very awkward. So anytime I'll get into side control, I'm looking, even with a cross face or whatever, I'm looking, sometimes I'll just grab the head and I'm looking to cross it and then I get here. And I keep his neck turned. So, and I usually do this more with newer people that like to bench press and push and go, and they're going wild and crazy, okay? Because it reduces their strength level, maybe by even half, I would say. I mean, they become substantially weaker. But that is an example of alignment, right? The concept of being in alignment. Now, if we're sitting in front of each other, and I want to play, let's say, a basic arm drag. So let's say I teach an arm drag, and I'm here, and I go in and I pull Ivan. Yeah, I might be able to grab Ivan and pull him across my body. That would be an example of me getting him out of alignment. Then I can form up attacks, right? But Ivan's a lot bigger than me, like most guys are here. They're bigger than me. If I grab Ivan, I pull, he's just going to resist, and that's it. I'm not going to be able to pull him across. So the idea is have the concept of not trying to move him so much, right? Not to drag him and pull him, because when we first start, we have this idea that we're just going to push the guy or we're going to move them where we want to move them. And this is a common, I think, misconception when you first start. It's kind of an illusion that gets broken very quick. You walk to the door, like, I'm going to manhandle everybody in here, and you can't even move people around. So it can be very difficult. So the idea here is that when I grab, I always look to move myself around the person. So if I grab, I already expect him to resist. If he doesn't resist, he is going to get dragged, okay? But if he does resist, I'm looking when I pull and he resists, I'm looking to go to the side, and I'm looking, that's it, just to have a simple angle. Once I get this angle, I can open up a Pandora's box of whatever I decide to go into, okay? So that's kind of an example of just alignment, right? I never want to be straight on, like just pushing back and forth, back and forth. So that would be the other concept. The next concept is big movements. Big movements, right? When you start, if you start watching like a lot of these guys that are, you know, really advanced, right? You start even blues, purples, browns, blacks. You'll start seeing a lot of times they don't make big movements. Sometimes they do just because, you know, maybe the situation calls for it. I always say as you get better, you kind of start breaking the rules, right? You kind of start going back and doing unorthodox things, which is great. That's the creative part of Jiu-Jitsu. But this idea of staying No, I lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Micro movements. The idea of having a movement, I generally don't want to have big movements. The better the person that I roll with, they're going to see these big movements, and it's not going to be a problem. If Ivan is walking around me, I see this all the time. I'll roll with guys like this, and they're just running around me, right? And I'm just like this. They're using all this energy, and all I'm doing is looking to keep the inside position, and I'm doing this. Where I have a problem, where I start to really have to engage with somebody, is when they start doing like micro movements, very small movements. So if Ivan goes to pass my guard and I'm here, he's doing little movements, that just like that. You see how his legs popped over like that? It was a quick boop movement. That's a perfect example of a micro movement, right? Whereas if Ivan were to like kick this leg really far back, and I'm like, boom, and I'm trying to like, and I can connect, right? Whereas if I'm here and I'm like, I'm going to boom, it's already over. He passed. It's just one example. It doesn't mean the first one's wrong. A kickback is a kickback. It's fine. Some positions call for that. But the idea here is like big motion movements, like somebody jumping on top of your guard and all that kind of stuff. I think there is a place for those kind of things, you know, like in tournaments and things like that. But I think when you get somebody that's really good at guard or really good, you know, at just playing, you know, on their back, I mean, those wild jumping things, these big movements are opportunities for them to capitalize on.
Yeah, that creates opportunity for me to actually find some space.
Yes.
To find a way either to a position or a submission.
Yes, exactly. So so this idea of these big movements is a concept that you try to, I don't say get rid of it, but understand that, you know, the bigger the movements, it's like you're telegraphing, right? If I throw a punch like this, Ivan already knows it's coming, right? But if I'm throwing like short jabs out there, it's a little harder to control, okay? So that's another conceptual idea, is to have these micro movements. And I don't know what else. What else do you think for concepts? I was gonna write all this down. I'm just going off the top of my head. Or do you want to add anything to it?
Concepts of control.
Control.
I don't know if you have, but you kind of went over it a little bit.
That's a good point. I like the idea too. Like I always say, you know, you have position, and then you have control of the position, and then you have a submission. A lot of times, you know, you just go into the position and then you just rush into the submission. And I would say that's another concept, is rushing things. Guys tend to they'll grab an arm. I'm gonna add two things to that: rushing things and fixation. Okay, so what that means is you get very tunnel vision. When you're a white belt, or when you're first starting, you become very tunnel vision. If I grab an arm and let's say I get lucky or something, I got like a lock on it or something, I got a Kimura, I'll see guys and they will not let it go. Now, that's a whole thing. You don't have to let it go. I mean, there's a whole system based off Kimura control. So maybe that's a bad example, but the idea here is that if I have something, and let's say I did get that Kimura control and I'm losing the position, is that I hold on to it, and I hold on to it, and I hold on to it, and then all of a sudden I end up in this really bad position, right? So that's the another concept, is like this idea of like tunnel vision, right? And that's actually hard to get rid of, because a lot of time, I mean, we're trying to choke each other.
And that's where some sweeps come in, and some variations of somebody reversing a position on you. I've seen a lot of newer people, let's say that they go into a mount, right, and they fix it on one arm. All their weight goes towards that side. They don't have the right alignment, right? And all you do is just go to the side. Yep. They bump out. That's all because they were fixating on an arm that I'm bending, just for them to do that. Right. So a lot of people fall into a lot of baits when it comes to that. Fixating into an arm bar that's not working, that's too shallow. Right. Fixating on a Kimura reversal. You know, you can get arm bar yourself. Yeah. So just got to be really careful with that. Like death grip things, you know, like death gripping something. You know, we've all rolled with somebody that's like just they death grip and they won't let it go, and you're just kind of like ankle locks. Yeah, ankle locks. You're just grabbing and squeezing. You're moving around, but nothing's happening. That just is probably a sign like you either A, he's defending really well, B, you don't have the position that well, or C, you don't really know how to finish a submission. Yep. So I mean that happens. You know, no shame. There's no shame. But again, like I have to Ivan's point too,
you know, the better guys you roll with, they're actually throwing things out there like that. Like, you know, Ivan will put his arm like this, hoping that you'll go for a Kimura because you're going to be offline. You're going to go off base, and he can get a sweep out of it, for example. So, and he's totally dependent on that fixation, getting you reeled into that one position. Okay. Now that's a hard thing to learn. I think it just happens over time. It's like repetition, you know. But if you can just at least have it in your mind, like, oh shit, I'm losing this position, right? I'm losing this arm bar. I need to advance my position, or regain something back, right? Like I already know this is gone, so I need to get my guard back, or whatever it may be. You just don't want to hold on to it, and all of a sudden you're flat on your side and the guy's trying to choke you, okay? So that's a concept. The other thing with that concept was the control, right? Don't rush things, okay? Like if in a high level competition, yes, but these guys are moving fast and accurate, right? A lot of times you'll see, and this is speaking mostly for beginners, you'll see them rushing things, right? And even some higher level guys, I see them just rushing movements, and it always occurs to me that when I'm watching this, I'm like, well, if they would just control the position first, like side control, they would just, like, for a perfect example is like you have side control and you want to go to mount for some reason, and you just rush to it real fast. You pass and then you jump to mount. Well, why do that? I guess there's reasons to do that, but honestly, you would probably have a better success with that if you control the position first. Once you pass, control the position, and then try to work your way to mount if indeed you want to go there, and, you know, try to apply some submissions or whatever it may be. So I see rushing is another thing that's
when it comes to guard passing as well. When you're newer, all you know is throw the legs on the other side.
Right, throw the legs.
Right?
Yeah.
Rush to the outside, and
right.
And that's a perfect position for me to turn,
yeah,
come back, and get either my butterfly or catch your arm on transition.
Yeah.
So you got to be methodical more than anything. But the more you practice it, the easier it'll come. And the more moves you learn and you see and you experience and you get done to you,
yeah,
then you get aware of it.
Yeah, I always say, like, I always remember, like, one of the first few things I was ever choked out with, or that happened to me in jiu-jitsu. It was very, like, it was in my brain.
Hey, Ezekiel chokes.
Yeah.
I got Ezekiel.
Yeah.
First 6 months.
That's brutal. It's like wrist locks. but you know, it is, and so keep in mind that is actually a process. It's not. It can be frustrating, but don't get frustrated. Eventually, it happens in time. You will start as you start to learn more moves and you become comfortable with positions. You'll start to see your game start to manifest in a way that is like evolving. Okay, so keep that in mind. I guess I don't know if this is necessarily a concept, but understand, you know, timing. Okay, so when I talk about timing, I mean, like, I mean that really if we're engaging in jiu-jitsu in some sort of position, but also where you're at in your game, right? Like I always say, like, I gave up a lot of moves. I just got rid of a lot of moves because I didn't think they worked. Some didn't, some were kind of silly, but a lot of stuff, when I revisited it, you know, 5 years later, man, I was nailing it. Boom, 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 right? So a lot of it can be timing, right? Like you may not have the tools to execute something yet, but doesn't mean the move is not still valid, right? It means that the move will work. It just requires you to have a better setup and better timing. The second part of the timing that I'm talking about is when we're actually doing jiu-jitsu. One thing you'll probably notice when, like, two black belts or brown belts or whatever, and they go at it, sometimes somebody's clearly better, right? Like they do it for a living or whatever. And somebody's doing it as a hobby, or somebody's older, somebody's younger. There's a clear difference. But let's just say we have two people exactly, you know, they're on the exact same level. Really what it boils down to a lot of times is timing. Somebody makes a mistake, a slight mistake, that could be perceived as a mistake, I guess, but the person capitalizes it by timing it correctly, right? So that's a huge part of jiu-jitsu, in my opinion, because you know, during all these stages, especially the white belt stage where you're just kind of learning how to do things, everything's failing. nothing's working, and that's for many reasons. You're probably rolling against somebody who's been rolling longer than you are. You don't know you don't know positions, controlling positions very well. You don't know even the submissions very well. You know the concept of armbar, but you don't know like all the nuances of armbar maybe, or all the variations of armbar there is. All the different reactions that are going to happen when doing those things. So timing is actually a very important thing to understand. And that'll, again, that's something you just kind of learn by continually to train and roll, or continuing to train and roll over and over and over and over and over. So, and I've seen timing go away too. I've seen guys that quit, for 5 years or for 6 months or a year, and they're brown belts, and they come back and like, man, I'm just getting my ass kicked. And the first thing they always say every single time is they say, my timing's off. Like, I know what's happening. I know I know what I'm trying to do, but my timing is just off. So understand, that happens, but that's a training aspect, right? But especially as a white belt, that's another factor as to why things may not be working. It's not that the move doesn't work. It's not that there's, you just suck at jiu-jitsu. It takes time.
Some of us do.
It takes time to learn, and consistency. Another thing too is silver bullet. There is no silver bullet, in my opinion. I don't think that there's. So I get asked quite a bit, especially in privates and stuff. Is this idea of like, well, how do I do it? How do I get out of this? Well, how does this work? Right? Like, or say what do I do to stop this? And I'm like, well, you can do this, and you can do this, and you can do this, and you can do this, right? And there's maybe 10 answers to what you could do. Okay, so silver bullet. Okay, going back to the silver bullet, this idea of the silver bullet. A lot of times I'm asked like, well, how do I stop this move from happening? Or how do I stop it? And people think, especially newer people, think that there's just this like one move to rule them all. Right? But there's really not. I haven't seen a move yet. Maybe some moves. I mean, people that can execute a move very well, like that's their move. Yeah, like it's a 90% chance they're gonna finish that move, right? But honestly, there is. When you ask me for a silver bullet, I'll give you 10 answers, because there is no like somebody said, well, how do I submit somebody from mount? Like 100% of the time. There is no answer for that, really, because it depends on who you're rolling with. Are you rolling with fucking Andre Galvao, or are you rolling with you're not gonna get it most likely. Are you rolling with Elliot? Are you rolling with are you rolling with somebody that just started? Like what level? There's that's just a factor in and of itself. Let alone how well are you executing it, how long you've been training, do you know the position very well,
how your timing is.
Exactly, going back to how your timing is. These are all factors, man, and like this is layered stuff, so I think just kind of putting this out there, so people don't. I've seen a lot of guys get frustrated, and they're like, wow, it's not working, man, I'm plateaued, this is not working, this and that. Well, a lot of these things we're talking about maybe a contributing factor, or maybe you can go back and revisit it, like, hey, I need to keep an inside position. I've been playing this part of my game, playing half guard or something. I'm just letting guys get underhooks on me. Okay, well, that's part of your game, that's fine. But if somebody's really good, like David Banter or something, he gets an underhook on you, he's going to pressure pass, and he passes your guard, and you can't stop him, and he does it 10 times, then you may want to go back to this concept of, oh shit, maybe I need to keep an inside position. So that way I can control the cross face, I can, get underhooks, I can control the inside space. So that's all I wanted to say about the silver bullet.
Yeah, and I mean, jiu-jitsu is infinite, right? It never ends. There's always moves, there is counters. Mm-hmm. There's counters to the counters. There's the counter to that counter. Yeah. Only that certain person can do it. That's why we advocate rolling a lot. Yeah. I advocate rolling from the first week you start. Yeah. Get a good partner, somebody that knows what they're doing, and just kind of roll. I mean, after you can do a lot of studying on video. You can do a lot of class taking, but nothing is going to beat that experience of rolling. I know some schools don't do it, and which is okay, and it's fine. And you want to make sure that the person doesn't get hurt the first few months, right? But I would advocate rolling. I mean, if I didn't roll my first day at Paragon and got my butt whooped, I wouldn't have came back.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't have done it because I wouldn't have experienced that.
Right.
But I mean, with our fundamentals class, I always make sure that I roll with all the new guys,
New people. Yeah.
all the big guys. I'm 5'2", all the 5'6", 5'7" non-stars that come in here.
Yeah.
I always make sure that I roll with them first so they know that jiu-jitsu works.
Right.
Not because I'm good, it's just because I've been doing it longer. Right. So practice is your friend.
Yeah.
That's why we're so frustrated that we can't get to train.
Yeah, a little bit. Ivan had a good point. You know, like when Ivan rolls with people, you know, I always tell people, and it's hard. I guess another thing to get rid of is the tension.
Yeah.
I think there's I see both sides. There's competition training, which is absolutely needed, and then there's the opposite end of that spectrum, which is like flow rolling, right? It's kind of like a dance. We're not really going for anything. I always say, if you really want to flow roll, just say no submissions. You know, and that kind of takes it down a notch. You know, because we always say let's flow roll, and then we end up going crazy. So, but if you really want to flow roll, I think this idea, you know, especially with Ivan, when he rolls with people that are brand new and they're just, and they grab him and he's just kind of like, you know, he's relaxed because, and it's a good example of understanding the position, understanding what's happening. He's you know, he's done it 1,000 times. I've done it 1,000 times, and I'm rolling with somebody. You can feel that tension, and then they can last maybe 60 seconds, and then you're burned out, right? So there's a place and time for that, you know, competition, things like that, fine. I still don't recommend it to the highest level like that, like just being full tense. You know, as you get better, you'll be more relaxed, so you can go further. So I would always say, like, a good concept, a good goal to have in mind is to try to relax. And that's easy for me to say. It is very difficult to do when you first start because, again, somebody's trying to hurt you, basically, right? Somebody's trying to break something, somebody's trying to choke you. That's it. So that can be very hard to manage because you're like, well, I'm trying to survive here. What am I supposed to do? Just let the guy choke me? Well, I mean, if you're working and, you know, I would say this, if you're first starting, you know, and there's like rounds afterwards or whatever there may be, try to get in like 3 rounds, right? See if you can get to that. If you find yourself just bench pressing and tiring out, stop, right? Breathe, catch your breath. I know that's really hard to do in the moment, but that's how you're gonna, I always say, guys, that's how you tell guys that's how their learning curve is gonna go from like this to like whoop, because as soon as you stop and just kind of analyze the position, even though you're getting choked, it's okay. You have to get choked 1,000 times. You have to get leg locked 1,000 times. You're gonna have to go through those things. If that never happens to you, then I could argue that you may not maybe know the position as well as you think you do if you haven't really felt what that position feels like. I mean, that matters a lot too, you know, feeling what a triangle feels like, where it cinched in, where it didn't. That opposite side of understanding that is very critical and important just in creating a foundation for defense, right? So, so that was another, I guess, an idea is like to try to have this idea of relaxing when you can, like breathe, you know, try to breathe, try to relax where you can. If you find yourself in side control, perfect example. Side control sucks, but I can tell you side control sucks a lot worse if you're trying to bench press the guy and you run out of energy, because then you're just helpless there. You can't do anything. What I can tell you is that you got your guard passed. Yeah, that sucks. Yeah, you may bench press the guy a couple times, but you notice you're running out of energy. You need to pull everything in tight and try to just defend, okay? And stay tight. Don't make it easy. You may still get submitted. It's probably going to happen. But at least when you get submitted, you can do another round. And that's the point. You get as much training in as you can, right? It'll also help you longevity, right? I'm 41 years old, and I've been training for a long time. It's, I guess, 16 years now. And one thing I've noticed is like, there is absolutely no way I could train at 100%, you know, even 3 times a week, 4 times a week at my age. I don't know about everybody else. I think I'm in pretty good shape, but there's no way my body couldn't handle it. And when you're younger, you get away with shit. I did all kinds of crazy shit. But even then, at around late 20s, early 30s, I started to understand I need to control my training a little bit. I can't be going, I've known guys over the years that have trained, they would go hard, man, every single roll. And I swear, like 2 or 3 years later, they can't roll anymore, or they quit.
They're broken.
They're broken, right. And that's just physically, you know, biologically, the shit breaks down. That's just the way it is, unless you go to Guatemala and get your stem cells therapy, then it's going to happen. So longevity comes into play, and the earlier you can understand that, the better. And that's a hard thing to understand and do, but I think that helps in the long run if you really, really want to continue doing jiu-jitsu. So understanding how to roll, like look at people like Ivan, how they roll. A good student I always refer to as Mallory. You know, I'm super proud of her because, you know, she rolls exactly, she has everything I'm looking for a person to roll, right? She's a blue belt. She started with knowing nothing. Now she's a blue belt, and she's never the biggest person, just like Ivan's, you know, never the biggest person in the room, not the strongest person, but always the most controlled and composed of most everybody in the room, and doing well, you know, like not getting submitted or pulling off submissions and understanding position. And really the only way you can do that is by practicing it.
Yeah.
Right.
And not panicking.
Mm-hmm.
And rule number 1 is the tap will set you free. I mean,
yeah.
A tap will set
practice.
you free and will allow you to train again.
Yeah.
Right. Tapping, sometimes it's the best thing that can happen to your jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
It's you tap, you go again, you try it again, tap, go again, try it again. Then you tap next week from the same thing, and you try to tweak it.
Yeah.
And then you develop a defense. You ask your coach about a defense or a concept, and then you're gonna go into YouTube and look it up and see if you find something else, and something is gonna work. So tapping is a good friend of yours in jiu-jitsu.
And look at it as like a learning experience, right? I've always looked at jiu-jitsu. I used to be a big chess player. You know, I'd lose, and it sucks because no one to blame but yourself, really, in chess. Like there's no luck involved, right? Like poker or something like that. Like you lose. But I look at it as as jiu-jitsu as kind of the same thing as a learning experience. Man, like a month or so ago, I had somebody come in here that was a very high level belt, and he was rolling with one of the blue belts here, purple belts, and he wasn't very versed in leg locks, I would say. He was, but man, I must have saw him tap, no joke, probably about 15, 20 times. Didn't bother him at all. He was actually analyzing the positions because he kept doing the same thing over and over, and he wanted to stop it. Well, because he's been doing it so long, like there was no, I guess, I hate using the word ego, but I mean, essentially it kind of is the ego thing, right? We don't want to lose, right? I mean, I don't want to get tapped out, you know, I guess most people don't, you know. It's not a goal, basically. The goal is to not get tapped out, but doing something and then saying, wow, that was crazy, how did the guy do that? And then he rolls again and he gets put in the same position, and he taps again, and then he taps again, and he taps again. They rolled for like 15 minutes straight. Like that's, you know, you can't do that going 100% balls to the wall, yeah. Right? Unless you're, got cardio, crazy cardio. CrossFit champion. But the idea of tapping, starting over. So what? I always tell guys, man, so what? You tap, whatever, start over. I tap, start over. You know, I've got tapped out by some of my students, purple belts, that tapped me out, and hey, whatever, man. I made a mistake, or they beat me to the timing. I knew what happened at that point, but it was good, And so I look at that as a learning experience, and it can be actually reinvigorating in a lot of ways. So look at it like that as an actual positive thing in a learning experience, rather than like, I'm losing and I suck and I don't know how to do jiu-jitsu. So I guess that was a little
again
long.
Some of us
yeah. So I guess, like, off the top of my head, those are some of the concepts on my way over here that I was going to talk about, that a lot of things that are asked of me I see common things asked of me all the time, right? And that's kind of how I still approach jiu-jitsu like that. Anytime I roll somebody, I don't know who they are, I'll roll with them, and I'm like, okay, I'm keeping inside. I'm gonna try to keep an inside position. I'm gonna play, It becomes a much more complicated game the more you learn, and the longer you've been doing it becomes more complex. But you can still use those fundamental ideas to improve your position, right? to not be just being crushed into side control, right? So that way you can explore and do things that you want to do, like a different guard you want to play, whatever it may be. Yeah. So okay, more concepts. Hopefully we still have your attention. Kind of long-winded. I know I'm long-winded, I'm sorry. Another good concept is, actually we'll do two. One is going to be, and just remind me of the second one, framing. But the first one's going to be staying pointy, or porcupine defense, as some people have coined it. I use this a lot, and I think it's a critical part of the game. And basically what that means is it's really used almost in a defensive. You can't use it offensively just to be like a jerk, but like grind your elbow into stuff. I mean, it's fine. You can do that. I generally don't grind my elbows into people when I'm attacking. You know, I think it's kind of silly because, you know, it's like grinding your elbow into somebody's leg. I mean, don't do that. I mean, that's just kind of it irritates the person. Some guys will take that, you know, they'll just take it all day, and you're just gonna anger them, and then they're gonna wrist lock you. So, so just FYI. So the concept of being pointy, this is really an idea of when Ivan's, maybe we're in half guard or something, let's say like that. Staying pointy is this idea of, let's say I'm losing this position or I'm coming up, right? The last thing I want to start kind of doing is I'm just like pushing. I don't think I ever do this, ever. I don't think I ever really push. There's a few times I do push, and that's either with the head to control the neck, because wherever the head goes, the body typically will go. But really what we're looking to do is staying pointy. So I'll use my elbows a lot with this, okay? So if we're here and I'm getting crushed, especially with somebody bigger and heavier than me, right? It is always in your favor to try to create a frame and stay pointy. And what this does, if you target, one of the targets I like to go to is right in this line of somebody's chest, right? Right where the collarbone is, right below the collarbone. You'll start to play with this. You'll notice your elbow sinks in real nice in these little sockets, like these little spaces right here. It just sinks in underneath that collarbone, and it kind of locks in a little bit, right? But the idea here is it makes it very uncomfortable for him. So he can't really apply as much pressure as he would like to apply. Whereas if somebody's trying to bench press, you know, eventually they're going to smear you down. It is very uncomfortable for him when I start getting pointy, right? And the more he pressures down, the more he probably doesn't want to do that. But the most important thing that this is creating, not only does it make it uncomfortable for him, but it allows me space. If you notice me pushing and he presses back, this is going to happen. Eventually you'll go against somebody who's bigger, stronger. It's going to happen. So you need to have this understanding of staying pointy. Like all else fails and I'm losing it all, if he's coming in, I need to keep my elbows like pointy into him. It's the same with the knees. I need to keep my knee pointing, right? Then up. Like these kind of things right here, staying pointy, okay? It's a porcupine defense. Making it uncomfortable for him and awkward, right? To where he has to acknowledge it. A lot of guys, sometimes when you get here and you're doing this stuff, they back up a little bit and then that's it.
It's terrible.
It sucks. I mean, again, it's not really you grinding your elbow into him. I'm just doing this. That's it. Ivan is pressuring himself in. So you're doing it to yourself, right? So, and it requires not much strength on my part. If it all else fails, I'll plant and then I'll keep this here. So I just create a frame with this, okay? That goes into the next thing, which is framing. I mean, so framing is, I think, probably one of the, I say a lot of my jiu-jitsu, a lot of my guard retention is based off of framing, okay? So if you learn anything, man, like start understanding and learning the uses of being able to frame properly. And what I mean by that is anytime I create a frame or a wedge, or however you want to put it. I mean, I guess those are two different things, but any kind of frame. A frame is like this, right? I'm framing out. Frame just basically means I'm not using a lot of energy, right? I'm just creating a frame and I'm fine. All right, so right like this, if I lock my legs, the Z-guard, it's just a frame. I shouldn't be like huffing and puffing trying to keep this, right? It's the same with my hands. Now, good frames, the reason why you have to learn them is you have to learn where to apply them. That's gonna be the learning curve. is where do I apply these frames? I can't just frame out right here. It doesn't do anything. I don't know why you do that, but maybe so. But if I like do like a good frame like this, right? Keeping a good frame, look at this. There's no energy, I can still talk to you, Ivan has all his weight down, right? So it's this concept of being able to frame out. And really what it does is it keeps you from having to waste too much energy, and you get to maintain the space that you have. So anytime I'm here and I frame, I keep all this space. This is mine now, right? This allows me to work. When I see I have this space, this means that now I have opportunity. If there is no space, I don't have much opportunity, okay? It comes down to what I know and how good my defense is, or if I wanted to be there. So framing is a critical part of any kind of guard retention or getting guard passes. It's the same thing with straight frames. If Ivan passes my guard and I go to side control and I get his arm over this side, if I lock, I teach this all the time. I frame by V-checking his arm and I lock my elbow out, my arm out. I rotate it and I lock it out. If Ivan comes back, straight back, it's hard. He can't come straight back because there is an alignment right here that can't break. What he's gonna have to do, let me turn it around right here. What he's gonna have to do if I was bent, he could just come straight back. Now I'm back to square one. But if I frame out, he has no choice but to go up that, right? Or he's gonna go over. If he just stays there and I sit up, he's gonna go over. So what does that do when he comes back up? Boom, he just created space. A lot of space. Easily, boom, right? So frames are very useful in any kind of guard retention, or maybe you need some space to do some sort of submission or something. They're really good for that. Maybe you worked really hard, you're going against somebody really good, you worked really hard just to get to this position, and you feel yourself starting to lose space. Well, you need to create a frame, right? To keep that. So that was the two things I wanted to add to for concepts was staying pointy. Don't do the bench pressing thing, right? Staying pointy, use your elbows, use your knees, right? Framing, right? Create strong frames. Frames on the ground, right? Frames on the ground. Yeah. So it's like a darce. Like a perfect example is if you darce me, right? One common thing is people do this. They frame. That's a frame. I mean, it works. It won't work forever. But look, I'm not using any energy. It's pretty much holding his weight up for the most part. And, you know, from here, maybe I can start, now I can work, right? Just a good frame. It's just posting on the floor and, you know, stopping what's happening, right? From cinching everything in. We're just stopping it, right? That's my idea for using frames, mostly for guard retention or creating space to do a move.